The champagne-splashed Josephine Winters never intended to attend the Metropolitan Museum's annual fundraising gala. It's the owner of a modest flower shop in Brooklyn. She typically spent her Saturday evenings arranging next-day wedding bouquets or curled up with a historical novel. But her cousin Delia, an assistant curator at the museum, had begged her to fill in for a last-minute cancellation. "Just wear that emerald dress from Tessa's wedding," Delia had insisted. "Nobody will know you don't belong." But Josephine knew. As she clutched her borrowed beaded purse in the grand hall filled with designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, she felt like an imposter. The emerald dress, the nicest thing she owned, suddenly seemed painfully inadequate among diamonds and custom. Couture. "Champagne, miss." A server appeared with a silver tray. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a flute and retreating to examine a nearby Renaissance painting. Art, at least, didn't care about social status. She was admiring the brushwork when a commotion near the center of the room caught her attention. A cluster of photographers and sleek-looking people surrounded a man in his late 30s, whose confident stance suggested he was accustomed to being the focal point of any gathering. "That's Harrison Reed," a woman nearby whispered to her companion. "Just sold his software company for billions. Say he donated $2 million to the museum tonight?" Josephine observed him with mild curiosity. Harrison Reed was undeniably handsome, with sharp features and dark hair showing the first distinguished touches of silver at his temples. But there was something performative about his smile that bothered her, a calculated charm that didn't reach his eyes. As she watched, Harrison raised his glass. "To art," he announced, "and to having the means to preserve it." His entourage laughed appreciatively at what wasn't actually a joke. Josephine felt a flicker of irritation. She'd grown up with parents who worked double shifts at the local hospital, who taught her that generosity was measured not by dollar amounts, but by the sacrifice behind the giving. When Harrison's group drifted closer to her corner, she couldn't help overhearing his conversation. "The restoration wing will naturally bear the Reed name," he was saying to the museum director. "I trust the signage will be appropriately prominent." Before Josephine could check her impulse, words escaped her lips. "Is that why you donated? For the signage?" The circle around Harrison fell silent. The man himself turned, surprised to be addressed so directly. "Excuse me?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Just wonder," Josephine continued, heat rising in her cheeks, but her voice steady. "If you care about the art itself or just about people knowing you paid for it." A woman in a diamond necklace gasped. The museum director looked mortified. Harrison's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex. He studied Josephine with unexpected intensity. "And you are?" he asked. "Someone who thinks true generosity doesn't need an audience." She set down her barely touched champagne and turned to leave, her heart pounding. "Wait." Harrison stepped away from his circle, following her. "That's an interesting perspective. I'd like to hear more." "I think I've said enough," Josephine replied, embarrassed now by her outburst. As she tried to move past him, a waiter rushed by with a loaded tray. Josephine sidestepped, bumping Harrison's arm. His champagne splashed across his immaculate tuxedo jacket. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing a napkin to her surprise. Harrison laughed, a genuine sound so different from his practiced chuckle earlier. "Well," he said, looking down at his soaked lapel, "I guess I deserve that. It was an accident," Josephine insisted. "Maybe," he replied, his eyes meeting hers with new interest. "But it feels like poetic justice. I'm Harrison Reed." "Josephine Winters. And I really should go, Josephine." He tested her name. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" She stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Entirely. No one's been that honest with me in years." "That's sad," she said simply, and realized she meant it. Wildflowers don't apologize the morning after the gala. Josephine's phone rang as she trimmed stems for a modest anniversary arrangement. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Josephine Winters, Winters Botanical," she answered, tucking the phone against her shoulder. "Ms. Winters, this is Daniel Kovacs, Mr. Reed's personal assistant." The voice was polite but businesslike. "Mr. Reed would like to confirm your dinner plans for this evening." Josephine nearly dropped her shears. "There are no dinner plans, too." "Confirm, I see." A brief pause. Mr. Reed was quite insistent. He's reserved a table at Lumiere at 8. Lumiere, Josephine repeated, thinking of the exclusive French restaurant she'd only read about in magazines. Mr. Kovacs, I appreciate the invitation, but I think Mr. Reed misunderstood our interaction last night. He anticipated you might say that. Asked me to tell you he's merely interested in continuing your conversation about authentic philanthropy. Josephine sighed, remembering her impulsive words. Please thank him, but tell him I'm busy. Of course. Have a pleasant day. She returned to her flowers, trying to ignore the strange mixture of relief and disappointment. What had she expected? That a billionaire would actually care about her opinion. 30 minutes later, the shop bell jingled. Josephine looked up from her workbench to see Harrison Reed himself standing awkwardly among buckets of daisies and carnations, looking absurdly out of place in his tailored suit. Your assistant said I was busy, she stated, setting down her clippers. Harrison gave a sheepish smile. He did relay that message. I thought perhaps I could change your mind in person. Do you always ignore people's boundaries? No, he replied, looking genuinely chastened. I rarely meet people who speak to me the way you did. Josephine studied. Him, without his entourage, Harrison seemed different, less like a caricature of wealth and more like an actual person. I have a business to run, she said, gesturing to the half-completed arrangements. Unlike some, I can't take random evenings. Off. What if I placed an order? Harrison walked around the shop, examining the vibrant displays. Something substantial that might justify closing early. Despite herself, Josephine laughed. Are you trying to buy my time, Mr. Reed? Harrison, please. He picked up a simple sunflower, twirling it thoughtfully. And no, not exactly. I'm trying. To create a fair exchange, life doesn't work that way. Mine usually does, he admitted, then quickly added, but I see your point. Josephine wiped her hands on her apron, considering him. Why me? There must be dozens of socialites who'd love to dine with you at Lumiere. Precisely why I'm here instead. Harrison set the sunflower down carefully. Look, I'm not good at this. At normal interactions, my world is, he gestured vaguely, complicated, and I'm uncomplicated. You're authentic, he corrected. I'd like to know the person who wasn't impressed by my donation or intimidated by my reputation. Josephine fought a smile. I spilled champagne on you. That too was refreshing in its way. A customer entered, glancing curiously between them. Josephine turned to help them, grateful for the interruption to gather her thoughts. When the customer left with a bouquet of tulips, Harrison was examining a shelf of small potted succulents. I can't do Lumiere, Josephine said finally. I close at 7, and I don't own anything appropriate for a place like that. Harrison looked up hopefully. Does that mean you might consider an alternative? There's a Vietnamese place around the corner. They do good for. Harrison repeated carefully, as if memorizing a foreign term. I've never had it. Josephine raised an eyebrow. You've never had pho? I usually dine at establishments with Michelin stars, he admitted, then winced at how it sounded. That came out wrong. At least you're honest about it. Josephine turned back to her workbench, 715, Saigon Kitchen on Mulberry Street. Or something casual they'll laugh if you show up in that suit. 715, Harrison confirmed, failing to hide his smile. Thank you, Josephine. As he reached the door, she called after him. And Harrison? This isn't a date. It's a conversation, of course. He nodded solemnly, but his eyes sparkled. Just two strangers discussing philanthropy over. Far. After he left, Josephine stood motionless among her flowers, wondering what she'd just agreed to. The practical part of her brain reminded her. This was absurd. People like Harrison Reed didn't genuinely pursue connections with small business owners from Brooklyn. Yet when she closed the shop that evening and changed into jeans and her favorite blue blouse, she found herself wondering. About the man behind the wealth, why had her criticism affected him so deeply? What was he seeking that his money couldn't buy? At 7:10, she locked the shop and walked to the restaurant, half expecting Harrison wouldn't show. But there he was, waiting outside in dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent but at least showed he'd listened. You came, she said, unable to hide her surprise. I said I would. Harrison looked almost nervous. Do wildflowers always keep their promises? Wildflowers don't make promises, Josephine replied with a small smile. And they certainly don't apologize for blooming where they're planted. Harrison studied her thoughtfully. I'm beginning to understand that. The weight of silver spoons 3 weeks after their Fay dinner. Josephine stood behind her shop counter arranging white roses for a corporate event when her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Can you escape for lunch? There's something I want to show you. She smiled, still marveling at how quickly their unlikely friendship had developed. After their first real conversation, which had stretched to nearly midnight, as they discussed everything from art to Harrison's complicated relationship with his wealth, they'd fallen into an easy pattern of casual meets. Coffee before her shop opened. Late dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants Harrison had never experienced. A Sunday afternoon at a community garden where Josephine had volunteered since college. Can't today. Big order deadline tomorrow. She texted back. Tomorrow won't work. This is time sensitive, please. Josephine hesitated. Harrison had been refreshingly respectful of her schedule, never pushing when she explained her small business couldn't run itself. This insistence was unusual. Just for an hour, he added.
I'll
have you back by 2. She glanced at her workload. The roses were nearly finished, and her afternoon appointment wasn't until 4. Fine, 12:30. This better be good, at precisely 12:30. Harrison's sleek black car pulled up outside. Josephine had learned he preferred to drive himself rather than use a chauffeur, one of many surprising details that contradicted her initial impression of him. Where are we going? She asked, sliding into the passenger seat. The Children's Hospital in Queens. Harrison navigated through midday traffic with practiced ease. The new pediatric wing opens today. Josephine gave him a puzzled look. You're involved because I funded it. He said this matter-of-factly, without the performative tone she'd witnessed at the museum gala. But that's not why we're going. At the hospital, Josephine was surprised when Harrison bypassed the main entrance with its gathering of press and officials. Instead, he led her through a side door where a woman in a lab coat waited. Dr. Patel Harrison greeted her warmly. This is Josephine Winters. Ah, the florist. Dr. Patel smiled knowingly. Harrison's told me about you. Everything's ready. Upstairs, as they followed the doctor through corridors, Josephine whispered, What exactly did you tell her about me? That you're helping me understand what matters, Harrison replied softly. The pediatric wing was bright and colorful, designed to feel more like a playroom than a hospital. In a large central area, Josephine was astonished to discover an indoor garden, not just potted plants, but a genuine green space with raised beds, a small tree, and child-height planters. This is what I wanted to show you, Harrison said, watching her reaction closely. The healing garden. It's not just decorative. Kids can actually garden here, plant seeds, watch things grow. Harrison. Josephine moved through the space in wonder, touching leaves and inhaling the earthy scent. This is incredible. It was your idea? I never suggested this. You did, though. His expression was earnest. Remember when you told me about teaching? Those kids at the community center? You said growing things gives people a sense of agency, especially when they're in situations where they feel powerless? Josephine remembered the conversation, a casual comment while they'd walked through the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And there's no plaque, she noted, looking around.
I'll read.
Healing garden sign anywhere. Harrison shrugged. Some things don't need an audience. Before she could respond, a group of children in hospital gowns entered with their caregivers. Dr. Patel began introducing them to the garden, explaining how they could choose seeds to plant and tend. Josephine watched Harrison kneel beside a small girl with a colorful headscarf, showing her how to fill a pot with soil. There was nothing performative in his gentleness, no cameras to capture his kindness. Something shifted in her perception of him, not erasing her initial criticism, but complicating it. Later, as they drove back to her shop, Josephine asked, Why did you really bring me there? Harrison kept his eyes on the road. I wanted you to see that I listened, that I'm trying to understand what you value. You didn't need to build a garden to impress me. That's not why I did it. He glanced at her briefly. It's a good idea that will help those kids. Your perspective made it happen. That's all. They fell silent until Harrison pulled up outside Winter's Botanical. My parents are hosting a dinner this weekend, he said suddenly, at our family estate in Connecticut. They've been asking to meet you. Josephine felt a flutter of anxiety. You've told your parents about me? They were curious why I've been spending time in Brooklyn? Harrison, we're not... She hesitated, unsure how to define what they were. Friends, he supplied. We're friends, and my parents want to meet my friend. Is that so strange? When your friend lives above a flower shop, and your family has an estate, yes, it's strange. Harrison sighed. Please come. Saturday evening? I'll drive you there and back. Something in his expression of vulnerability she rarely glimpsed made her nod. All right. But I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. Would never ask you to. Saturday evening found Josephine in the back of Harrison's car, wearing a simple navy dress and feeling increasingly out of place as they passed through iron gates and up a winding drive to a sprawling colonial mansion. You didn't mention your family lived in a museum, she murmured as Harrison helped her from the car. It's just a house, he replied, though his tight smile suggested he understood her discomfort. Inside, Josephine met Vivian and Richard Reed Harrison's impeccably polished parents whose cold civility barely masked their assessment of her. Dinner was an elaborate affair served by staff in a formal dining room beneath a crystal chandelier. So Josephine, Vivian said delicately, Harrison tells us you sell flowers. I own a floral design business, Josephine corrected. I studied botany at CUNY How. Enterprising, Vivian exchanged a look with her husband. And your family. My father was a janitor at Mercy Hospital. My mother was a nurse there, was Richard inquired. They passed away 5 years ago. Car accident. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken when Harrison said firmly, Josephine rebuilt her family's shop from nothing after they died. She employs 3 people and has contracts with some of the best restaurants in Brooklyn. The conversation moved on, but the weight of unspoken judgment lingered. Later, as Harrison drove her home, Josephine stared silently at the passing streetlights. Sorry about my parents, he finally said. They're exactly what I expected. And what about me? Harrison asked quietly. Am I what you expected? Josephine turned to study his profile in the darkness. No, you're not. That's what scares me. What are you afraid of? That we come from worlds so different they can never truly connect. She gazed out the window again. We're born with a silver spoon, Harrison. I was born with dirt under my fingernails. Some differences can't be bridged. I don't believe that, he said, his voice determined. Silver can tarnish. Dirt nurtures growth. Maybe we need both. Josephine didn't answer. But as they reached her shop, she found herself wondering if he might be right. Thorns and roses autumn painted. Brooklyn in amber and crimson as Josephine and Harrison's relationship deepened through shared moments, a surprising delight in helping her repot plants on Sunday mornings. Her reluctant attendance at a charity, Galloway Harrison, true to his word, had removed his name from the donor recognition. Quiet evenings in her modest apartment above the flower shop, where he seemed more at ease than in his sleek Manhattan penthouse. Still, Josephine maintained, careful boundaries. When Harrison's casual touch lingered, she'd step away. When conversations veered toward their future, she'd change the subject. She couldn't deny her growing feelings, but neither could she ignore the fundamental disparities between them. Overthinking this, Delia told her over coffee one morning. The man clearly adores you. It's not that simple, Josephine sighed. Every time I start to believe we could work, something happens to remind me how different our worlds are. What? Like yesterday? Josephine said, stirring her coffee absently. He casually mentioned buying a yacht to explore the Greek islands next summer, as if it were as ordinary as planning a weekend drive. And that bothers you because I'm calculating if I can afford to repair my delivery van this month. Josephine's frustration spilled out. Because his casual indulgences cost more than I'll earn in a decade. 'cause I don't know how to exist in his world, and I'm not sure he can truly understand mine. That evening, Harrison appeared at her door with takeout from their favorite Vietnamese restaurant and a small, wrapped package. "What's this?" Josephine asked, eyeing the gift suspiciously. "Open it," he urged, setting out the food containers. Inside was a first-edition copy of The Secret Garden, her favorite childhood book, which she'd mentioned once in passing. "Harrison, this must have cost—" "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Don't calculate the price. Just tell me if you'd like it." "I love it," she admitted, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "But this is exactly what I'm talking about. Solve everything with money." Harrison's expression fell. That's not fair. I listened to something that matters to you and found a thoughtful gift that most people couldn't afford to give. So I should pretend I don't have resources." He set down his chopsticks. "Do you prefer I bought a mass-market paperback instead, knowing this edition would mean more to you?" Josephine placed the book carefully on her coffee table. "I just don't want our relationship built on what you can provide financially. Is that what you think this is?" Harrison's voice held a rare edge. "That I'm trying to buy your affection?" "No, not intentionally. But you've never had to consider the cost of things. It's second nature for you to throw money at problems, at desires. That shapes who you are, Harrison." "And who am I exactly?" he asked quietly. Josephine hesitated, seeing hurt in his eyes. "Someone who's never had to sacrifice, who's never wondered if they'll make rent, who can't fully understand what it means. To struggle? You think I haven't struggled?" Harrison stood, pacing the small living room. "My struggles just look different from yours." "Like what?" "Choosing between the yacht and the private jet." The moment the words left her mouth, Josephine regretted them. Harrison's expression hardened. "Is that really how you see me? After all these months, Harrison, no, please." He raised a hand. "Let me tell you about my struggles, Josephine. My father measuring my worth by quarterly returns since I was 12, the crushing pressure of inheriting a family legacy I never asked for, the paralyzing loneliness of never knowing if people want your company or your connections, the emptiness of achieving everything society says matters and still feeling hollow inside." Josephine was silent, seeing raw pain she'd never allowed herself to recognize before. Are those struggles as significant as financial insecurity? Maybe not, but they're real. I thought, his voice faltered. "I thought you were beginning to see me beyond my bank account, but maybe I was wrong." "That's not fair," she protested. "I've tried to understand your world." "Have you? Or have you kept one foot permanently out the door, convinced our differences would eventually tear us apart?" The truth of his words stung. Josephine had been holding back, protecting herself from inevitable disappointment. "What happened to silver?" "Can tarnished dirt nurtures growth?" Harrison asked softly. "Was that just a nice sentiment, or did you ever actually believe we could balance each other?" Before she could answer, Harrison's phone rang. He checked it, frowning. "It's my father. I need to take this." Josephine watched as Harrison's expression transformed during the call, his features hardening into the businessman she'd first glimpsed. "At the museum gala? I understand," he said tersely. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call, already reaching for his jacket. "There's an emergency board meeting. A hostile takeover attempt of our primary subsidiary. I have to go now. It's almost 9 o'clock. That's how these things work, Josephine. Millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs are at stake. The gulf between them had never felt wider. As Harrison moved toward the door, Josephine asked, "Will you come back after? To finish our conversation?" He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Would it make a difference? Or have you already decided we're too different to work?" "That's not fair," she repeated, feeling tears threaten. "Maybe not. But I'm tired of trying to prove I'm more than my wealth while you use that same wealth as a reason to keep me at arm's length?" Harrison's voice was weary. "I love you, Josephine. I've never said that before because I was afraid it would scare you away. But I'm more afraid of pretending these feelings don't exist." The declaration hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrifying. "I need to go," he said when she remained silent. "Take some time. Figure out if you can love all of Meetha's silver spoon and whatever else you see in me, or if our differences really are insurmountable. After he left, Josephine sat among her plants in the growing darkness. She picked up the antique book, remembering a passage about gardens being places where things that seemed dead might actually be gathering strength underground. Waiting for the right moment to grow, she wondered if their relationship was like that, if beneath their obvious differences, something stronger was taking root. Or if, like some grafted plants, they were fundamentally incompatible, despite their best intentions. For the first time since meeting Harrison Reed, Josephine allowed herself to imagine truly letting him into her life, not as a temporary fascination, but as a partner. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against her windows as the night deepened. Josephine reached for her phone several times, but set it down again, uncertain what she could say to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Some divides, she knew, could only be crossed by meeting in the middle. The question was whether she was brave enough to take those steps. Replanning routes 3 days passed without word from Harrison. Josephine moved through her routines, mechanically cutting stems, arranging bouquets, helping customers, while their unfinished conversation echoed in her mind. Each time the shop bell jingled, her heart leaped, only to sink when Harrison didn't appear. "You're a coward, Josephine Winters," she muttered to herself on the fourth morning, misting orchids with more force than necessary. The truth of it stung. She had been using their differences as a shield, protecting herself from vulnerability by focusing on inevitable failure. When her phone rang with an unfamiliar number, she answered quickly. "Harrison, Miss Winters. This is Daniel Kovacs, Mr. Reed's assistant." Josephine's stomach tightened. "Is everything all right?" "Mr. Reed asked me to inform you he's traveling to Tokyo for emergency negotiations. The situation with the company is complicated. When will he return?" "That's uncertain. The matter could take weeks to resolve." Daniel hesitated. "Also instructed me to tell you he understands if you've made your decision, and he respects whatever conclusion you've reached." After hanging up, Josephine stood motionless among her flowers. Harrison believed she'd chosen to end things, that she'd decided their worlds were too far apart. And perhaps he was right to think so. Hadn't she been saying exactly that for months? The prospect of never seeing him again created a hollow ache she couldn't ignore. That evening, Josephine searched online for news about Reed Enterprises. Business journals reported the attempted hostile takeover in dry, technical language that revealed nothing about the man at the center of the storm. One article included a photo of Harrison exiting a building in Tokyo, looking exhausted in a rumpled suit. The sight of his tired eyes made her chest constrict. 2 weeks crawled by. Josephine threw herself into work, accepting every order that came through the door. She stayed until midnight, crafting elaborate arrangements, as if beauty could fill the emptiness she felt. When Delia visited the shop, she took one look at Josephine's face and said, "You love him?" "It doesn't matter," Josephine replied, trimming thorns from roses with precise motions. "We want different things. Do you? Or are you just afraid of wanting the same things from different perspectives?" The question lingered as Josephine closed the shop that night. On impulse, she pulled out her laptop and searched for flights to Tokyo. The prices made her wince sizzily a month's rent, but she found herself reaching for her rarely used credit card anyway. Before she could complete the purchase, the shop bell jingled. Josephine looked up, irritated at the late visitor, then froze. Harrison stood in the doorway, rain-damp and travel-worn, his usual polished appearance replaced by obvious exhaustion. "You're in Tokyo," she said stupidly. "I was." He remained by the door, as if uncertain of his welcome. "We concluded negotiations this morning. I came straight from the airport." "You look terrible," she observed, drinking in the sight of him. Ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Always honest." "Always," she agreed, heart hammering against her ribs. "I thought about calling first," Harrison said, "but I needed to see your face when I told you what I've decided." Josephine's breath caught. "Which is?" "I'm stepping down as CEO of Reed Enterprises." Of all the things she'd expected, this wasn't one. "What? Why?" "Because running the company was my father's dream, not mine." as it moved further into the shop, stopping at a respectful distance. I've spent my life trying to be what everyone expected. The perfect heir, the ruthless businessman, the generous philanthropist, every role except the one I actually wanted. Which is what? Josephine whispered. Someone who builds something meaningful, something that grows. His eyes held hers steadily. I'm someone worthy of a woman who sees through facades and values authenticity above all else. Josephine stepped toward him. Harrison, you don't need to change your entire life for me. I'm not, he countered. I'm changing it for myself. These past weeks in Tokyo, fighting to save a company I've never truly cared about, I realized how empty that existence is. He ran a hand through his damp hair. I've appointed a new CEO, someone who actually wants the job. I'm keeping my seat on the board, but my focus is shifting. To what? Remember the children's healing garden? A genuine smile warmed his tired features. I'm establishing a foundation to create urban green spaces in underserved communities, places where people can grow things, connect with nature, rebuild what's been lost in concrete jungles. The vision was so unexpected, so perfectly aligned with values they shared, that Josephine felt tears spring to her eyes. I'd like your help, Harrison continued softly. Your expertise, your perspective. But more than that I want ... He hesitated. Vulnerability clear in his expression. I want a chance to see if what's growing between us is as rare and valuable as I believe it is. Josephine crossed the remaining distance between them. You came back? Did you think I wouldn't? I thought. I'd pushed you away for good, she admitted. That I'd been so focused on our differences, I'd destroyed any chance of discovering what we might become together. Harrison reached for her hand cautiously. And now, I think maybe we were both right. She interlaced her fingers with his. You with your silver spoon, me with my dirt-stained hands. Maybe we need both to build something real. I can live with dirt, Harrison said, his smile widening. I've discovered I rather like it. I can tolerate a little silver, Josephine. Conceded, as long as it's balanced with substance. Harrison's free hand gently traced her cheek. I missed you, Wildflower. I missed you too. She leaned into his touch. Even your ridiculous wealth, he laughed, the sound warming the empty shop. Speaking of which, there's something I need to tell you about the foundation. Let me guess, you've already purchased a building? 3, actually, in different boroughs. At her raised eyebrow, he added defensively, they were good investments. Josephine shook her head, but her smile remained. We're going to need ground rules, such as, you can't solve every problem by throwing money at it, agreed Harrison, nodded solemnly. And you can't dismiss every grand gesture as merely a product of wealth rather than genuine feeling. Fair enough. Josephine studied him. This foundation is not just for me, is it? It's something you truly want? It's something I need, Harrison corrected. Purpose, meaning, growth. His voice softened. Things you've shown me matter more than acquisitions or profit margins. In that moment, Josephine finally allowed herself to see beyond their surface differences to the complementary strengths they offered each other, his resources and her resourcefulness, his vision and her practicality, his world expanded by her perspective, her life enriched by his possibilities. I love you, she said simply, not despite our differences, but including them. Harrison's face transformed with joy. Even the silver spoon, even that, she confirmed. Though I still prefer the dirt. Then perhaps we should find some middle ground, he suggested, pulling her closer. Somewhere between silver and soil. I think, Josephine whispered against his lips, we already have. 1 year later, Josephine stood in the first completed Reed Winters community garden in South Bronx, surrounded by neighborhood children planting sunflower seeds. Nearby, Harrison knelt in the dirt, his expensive jeans stained at the knees, helping an elderly man position a tomato seedling. Never thought I'd see the day, Delia commented, joining Josephine, a Reed getting his hands dirty voluntarily. Right. Not just a Reed anymore, Josephine replied, twisting the simple silver band on her left hand. The modest engagement ring held a tiny emerald rather than a diamond. Harrison's acknowledgement that true value wasn't always measured in carats, as if sensing her gaze. Harrison looked up and smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile that had become increasingly natural over their months together. Josephine felt the familiar warmth bloom in her chest. Knowing they were creating something beautiful in the space between their worlds, they were learning to grow together, finding fertile ground. In the very differences that once threatened to keep them apart,